the people who sold it to me smudging it with a smudge stick. Do you know what smudging is? Which means basically like blessing it so that nothing bad would ever happen to me in that car, which didn't work. So I drove down to Santa Cruz, and it was one of those labors. It was her first baby, and it was one of those labors where it takes like so long. I mean, we were in that room with her with no pants on for like 3 days. It was like excruciatingly long. And at the end of it, we were all so overwhelmed and exhausted and like caught up in the moment that when her midwife, which was kind of a stretch for her because she grew up like I did, she grew up very sort of, you know, unsupervised, sort of hippie environment, but she leads a much more traditional life than I do, she always has. And this midwife says, okay, well, we have the placenta, and we can't let the doctor and nurses see. If you want to take it home, you have to do it now. You have to sneak it out of here because it's really against policy. And my sister had just been to this party, this blessing way, which is so funny. This is like a very Northern California thing where you have a baby, and instead of having a party, you have a blessing way, which is this Native American thing, which at the time seemed so normal. But now I think about it, and I'm like, that would be like my Irish Catholic husband having like a bar mitzvah for our daughter. It was so inappropriate if you really think about it. But everybody was really into it at the time. And she had been at this party, this blessing way, and they had buried the placenta in the backyard and planted a tree over it, and it was like this like, totally beautiful ceremony. And then they all went inside to have like whatever, vegetarian whatever, and the dog runs across the lawn with the placenta in his mouth. So she was like, no, I don't want it. And I was like, no, we have to do something with it. It's so special. And so they gave it to me, and they put it in this big white Tupperware container. And I don't really know, like, this was at a point in my life where I didn't have a plan for anything, much less, like, what to do with the placenta. So I put it was in this big white Tupperware, and I put it in the back of my car, which was, like, basically my purse in those days. And I drove that car. I left the day after the baby was born, and I drove up to see some friends who were all on this beautiful piece of property on the Klamath River. It was like, 1,000 acres, totally amazing. And they had an orchard, and I was like, oh, I should totally bury it under a tree, because I'm going to be coming here for the rest of my life, and I don't even know those people's emails right now. But I was like, yeah, this is totally what I should do with it. I get up there, it's like 100 degrees, and we're all swimming and eating and hanging out, and totally forget about the placenta. So Monday morning, and I always did this on the weekends, and it was so stupid. So I'm like way up on the California coast. I'm like an hour south of Oregon. And I live in Mendocino, and I work in Mendocino, which is like 4 or 5 hours south of there. And the highway to get to my house is Highway 1, like you see in the magazines where it's just all switchbacks. And you're either hanging off the edge of a cliff, or you're like slaloming through redwood trees. And the first time you do it, you're like, oh my God, how can a road be here? The second time, you're like, all right, I think I got it. And the third time you do it, especially when you're late for work and it's Monday morning and you've got coffee between your legs and your car's so old you don't have a cup holder, you're just like depending on centrifugal force to get you where you want to go. And you're not even really paying attention, which is what was happening with me. And it was super early. I was a little hungover and tired. And the roads were a little wet, and my coffee was really way too hot for having been as old as it was. And I came around the corner, and there was a deer. And it wasn't even in the middle of the road. It was off to the side of the road. But it was so startling that I just made one quick moment, and my little piece of shit car flew off the road and into a ditch, which was not a big deal. I wasn't hurt. It was totally fine. But in the instant that my car hit the other side of the ditch, so I was like this, I see this white Tupperware fly from the back of the car, like towards the dashboard, and I'm like having this moment of like, white Tupperware. Holy fuck, I know what's in there. And it just hits that point where the dashboard meets the windshield and just fucking explodes. I mean, like, and it had been like broiling away in my car, and like, and I was totally, I mean, I can't say for sure that I was in shock because of the accident, because it really wasn't that bad of an accident. I just hit this, it was going like maybe 35 miles an hour. And I'm like just sitting there kind of stunned, and then my first thought is, wow, I can't see anything out of my windshield. Like, what am I going to do about that? Like, not really connecting the fact that my car was like, nose down in the ditch. And then I hear this little tap, tap, tap. And I look over, and there's a guy's face, like, right in the window. And he does that universal sign for roll down your window. He's like, and so I'm like, I roll down my window, and I'm looking at him, and I have